right. We looked at our questions from more of a museum point of view, because that's where we were coming from. So we wanted to know how we could achieve new audiences, how we could get them in. We came upon a few sort of valuable points. Was that we'd be looking at new networks, gaming networks that you can go through, the new sort of social network sites and things like that. There's also a sort of physical way in which you can get new audiences in. That could be having big visuals and games outside, like the Baltic does it with huge big posters down the outside. You're intrigued and you go in, which is important. We need people to come through our doors. And then there's also the idea of the old-fashioned circus where they roam through the streets and collect everyone and you'd all go and you know what's going on. And it's important that you use appropriate advertising to your audience that you want and appropriate PR as well. It's just unfortunate that there's so many different things that you can do now. It doesn't make the job easy. And these things need to be maintained and sustainable so that everybody knows and gets used to what they are and they keep going, and you get more and more new people, new audiences in to play these games in museums and come in and experience the museum. And then our next question was looking at the learning outcomes. Everyone has their outcomes that have to tick off in a museum, and we sort of tried to structure it slightly. The first thing with a game, we as a museum would want the game to increase the awareness of the collection and the museum's existence, basically. So they've already gained knowledge that you're there. If they don't know that, then you can't do the others. The next thing is the game needs to engage that person, whoever it is, taking part. That could be socially, they could be gaining knowledge or skills, but if they're not engaged, they're not going to take further part in the game or take further part with the museum. Then the social outcomes come into play. Before your learning outcomes, before you learn a fact, you are involved in the game, you've taken part in it, and you've got your other people around you. So socially, you're getting involved first. Lastly, we had the learning outcomes where they perhaps learn a specific fact about an object or a theme within your museum. But the idea would be that all of these game ideas would be sustainable and have a longevity so that everybody experiences all of these four main points by the end of the game and the program that you put in place. And so the organisation can grow with games and getting people in, and also maintain an interest through games for the public users.
Our group also had 3 questions, but I think they were sort of touched upon in the 5 previous ones you heard about, and I think for our portion we'd sort of like to talk about some ideas for games. And one of them is sort of an illegitimate child of your original idea, Daniela. It's of encouraging misbehavior, so maybe it's more of a scary idea instead of a wild one. But basically what we're envisioning is using those moments that you find a visitor misbehaving in your museum, which I'm sure happens all the time. It happens at our museum all the time. Such as when you see a label with a corner that's slightly peeled up, it's so irresistible not to touch and pick and poke. And for me, it recalls, sunburns and peeling skin and acne as a young adult. So it's just this human response to something that's out there, you need to peel it. So maybe you encourage that, and visitors keep peeling and peeling away, and there's a message underneath that initial panel. And maybe that's part of the game component. Maybe it's a clue to the next step. Or it could be as simple as allowing someone to flip on or off the light switch. What does that do? Does it have a response of activating something, activating a new experience within the gallery? Maybe. maybe a door is slightly ajar in one of the galleries and there's a light that's seeping underneath. Do you allow a visitor to open the door and discover an ancient pot or a dinosaur fossil? That could lead on to the next experience. So, encouraging bad behavior, misbehavior, something mischievous. Obviously, this would take a lot of planning, and I think it would be very difficult to overlay this on an existing museum or gallery. But if you plan for it, I think it could be pretty interesting. Let's see, what was another one that we had? Kicking stones, I believe. That one, it was a brilliant idea, and we played telephone with it for a while, and eventually it came back to me and it ended up kicking stones. I don't know what that is. Let's see. Reversal of roles. So what if the visitor actually becomes an object? We were talking about setting up the experience, setting up the gameplay as if someone dresses up like an object in the gallery. So maybe someone becomes a deer in a diorama. What's that experience throughout the museum? Or what if some person becomes a Roman pot? That could also lead to another exciting game. Yeah, those are the questions, but I'll just stop there.
And what's anybody in this group's next step? Is anybody gonna start working on a game because of this? Or run fleeing from the idea of leaving?
Yeah, I think so. I was really interested to see about taking the outside space and bringing it into the gallery, because we've just opened up into the park of Whitworth Art Gallery. So we discussed that we started something that was a game outside and it ended inside. So we're kind of getting our surrounding community back into the gallery, so our fences have come down, everything's coming out. So that's my next step, is to kind of figure out a game, almost like what we played this afternoon, of just getting people inquisitive about what's going on in the park, and then you follow this game and you end up inside, and then you're like, oh, what's in here? And then you kind of go in. So that's
Talk later tonight. I'm doing a game like that sitting in right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And yeah.